Once upon a time, in a world where the gods lived high up in the clouds and magic sparkled in every dewdrop, there was a little shepherd boy named Lysander. But oh my, this wasn't just any ordinary little boy. Lysander had something very special about him. He could talk to the wind, and the wind would whisper back the most wonderful secrets. Now, you might think that sounds absolutely marvelous. And it was, but sometimes, my dear little listener, having something magical can also bring big worries. You see, Lysander lived in a time when the world was becoming darker and scarier. The grown-ups in his village would frown more and smile less. They would argue about things that didn't seem very important. And worst of all, they had begun to forget how to dream beautiful dreams at night. One particularly gray morning, when the sun seemed too tired to shine properly, Lysander was sitting on his favorite hillside with his fluffy white sheep. The sheep were called Cloudy, Puffy, Woolbird, and Little Snuggles, and they were the best listeners in the whole world. Lysander was feeling very sad because the night before he had tried and tried to have a good dream, but all that came were worried thoughts about his mama and papa, who seemed so tired all the time now. Oh, Cloudy, he sighed to his biggest sheep. Why can't everyone sleep peacefully like they used to? Why do the grown-ups toss and turn and make worried sounds in their sleep? That's when something absolutely extraordinary happened. The wind began to whisper, but this time it wasn't just any wind. It was a golden, shimmery breeze that smelled like honey and lavender, and all the best bedtime smells you could imagine. Little shepherd, the wind whispered in a voice as soft as silk pajamas. I have been waiting for someone pure of heart to ask that very question. Far, far away, beyond the mountains that touch the sky, and past the seas that sing lullabies to the moon, there is a magical place called Elysium. Lysander's eyes grew as wide as saucers. You know, those really big plates your grandma uses for special occasions. Elysium, he whispered back. What kind of place is that? The golden wind swirled around him, making his curly hair dance and his sheep's wool sparkle like stars. Elysium, dear child, is where the most beautiful dreams live. It's where Hypnos, the gentle god of sleep, keeps all the peaceful rest that has gone missing from your world. But oh, little one, something terrible has happened. Now, Lysander was a brave little boy, but his heart started beating a little faster, not from fear, but from that special feeling you get when you know something important is about to happen. What terrible thing? He asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. The Nightmare King, the wind whispered, and even though it tried to keep its voice gentle, Lysander could hear the worry in it. He has built a great wall of thorns and shadows around Elysium. He has trapped all the good dreams inside, and now children everywhere are having trouble sleeping. Parents can't rest peacefully. Even the flowers forget to close their petals at night. Little Snuggles, the smallest sheep, came and nuzzled against Lysander's leg, as if she understood that he needed comfort. Lysander petted her soft wool and tried to be brave. But I'm just a little boy, he said quietly. How could I possibly help fix something so big and scary? The golden wind grew warmer and more comforting, wrapping around Lysander like the coziest blanket in the world. Ah, but that's exactly why you're the perfect one to help. You see, dear Lysander, the Nightmare King's power comes from fear and worry. and all those heavy feelings that make it hard to sleep. But you, sweet child, you have something he cannot understand or fight against. What's that? Lysander asked, sitting up straighter. You have the pure heart of a child who still believes in magic, who still talks to sheep like they're your best friends, who still makes wishes on dandelions. The Nightmare King has forgotten what it feels like to be innocent and full of wonder. That makes you very, very powerful indeed. Lysander looked around at his peaceful hillside, at his fluffy sheep who trusted him completely, at the village below where everyone he loved was struggling to sleep well. He thought about his mama's tired eyes and his papa's worried frown. He thought about the other children in the village who had been having bad dreams. Will you help me? He asked the wind. I want to try, but I don't know how to get to this Elysium place, and I'm scared I might not be brave enough when I get there. The wind laughed, and oh, what a beautiful sound it was, like tiny silver bells mixed with the sound of gentle rain on a cozy roof. Of course I'll help you, brave little shepherd. But first, you must understand that this journey will not be easy. You'll meet creatures you've never seen before. You'll have to solve puzzles that would make even the wisest owls scratch their heads. And most challenging of all, you'll have to face your own fears. Lysander swallowed hard, but then he looked at little Snuggles and remembered how she was always brave when the bigger sheep were around. If a tiny sheep could be brave, then so could he. I want to try, he said, and his voice was stronger than he expected. Everyone deserves to have good dreams. That's my brave boy. The wind cheered, and suddenly it began to swirl faster and faster around Lysander and his sheep. But you won't go alone. Cloudy, Puffy, Woolbert, and Snuggles. They all have special gifts that will help you on your journey, and I'll be with you every step of the way. My sheep can come too, Lysander asked excitedly. The idea of going on a big adventure was scary, but doing it with his best friends made it seem much more possible. Of course, Cloudy can float on air like a real cloud when you need to cross dangerous places. Poofy can puff up to 3 times her size to protect you from harm. Woolbert's wool can light up in the dark like the softest lantern you've ever seen. And little Snuggles, well, she has the most important gift of all. What's that? Lysander asked, looking down at his smallest sheep with wonder. She can sense where love lives in any heart, no matter how hidden it might be. Even the Nightmare King was once someone's child, someone who needed love and good dreams too. This made Lysander think very hard. He had never considered that someone who did scary things might also be scared and sad inside. It was a very grown-up thought, but somehow it made him feel even braver. If the Nightmare King was just someone who had forgotten how to have good dreams, then maybe, just maybe, Lysander could help him remember. When do we start? Lysander asked, standing up and brushing the grass off his simple shepherd's clothes. Right now, if you're ready, the wind replied. But first, let me give you 3 gifts for your journey. The golden wind swirled around Lysander one more time, and suddenly 3 magical things appeared before him. The first was a small flute made of silver moonbeams. This is the flute of peaceful dreams, the wind explained. When you play it, anyone who hears it will remember their happiest, most peaceful moment. The second gift was a small pouch that sparkled like it was full of stars. These are seeds of hope, the wind said. Plant one whenever you or someone else feels too scared or sad to go on. and it will grow into exactly what you need most in that moment. The third gift was the most beautiful thing Lysander had ever seen, a compass that looked like it was made of crystallized starlight. "This is the heart compass," the wind whispered. "It will always point toward what your heart knows is right, even when your mind is confused or scared." Lysander carefully tucked the magical gifts into his shepherd's bag, right next to the simple lunch his mama had packed for him that morning. It seemed like such a normal thing next to all this magic, but it made him feel connected to home and to the people he was trying to help. "Now," said the wind, "are you ready for your first challenge?" Before Lysander could ask what that meant, the world around him began to shimmer and change. The familiar hillside started to fade away, and in its place, a winding path appeared. But this wasn't just any path. It was made of clouds that sparkled with rainbow colors, and it stretched up into the sky toward mountains that looked like they were made of amethyst and pearl. "Oh my," breathed Lysander, holding tightly to Snuggles' fluffy back. "It's so beautiful, but so high up." "Don't look down," advised the wind gently. "Just look ahead to where you want to go, and trust that the path will hold you." Lysander took a deep breath, the kind of deep breath you take before jumping into a swimming pool, and stepped onto the cloud path. To his amazement, it felt solid under his feet, bouncy and soft like walking on the world's most comfortable mattress. Cloudy, being the smart sheep she was, immediately figured out how to float alongside the path, her woolly body drifting through the air, like she had always known how to fly. Puffy, Woolbert, and Snuggles followed carefully behind Lysander, their hooves making tiny, puffing sounds on the cloud path. As they climbed higher and higher, Lysander could see the whole world spread out below them. His village looked like a collection of tiny toy houses, and he could see other villages too, all looking peaceful and small from up here. But as they got even higher, he began to notice something troubling. The further they went from his home, the darker and more twisted the landscape became. The green fields turned gray, the rivers looked like they had stopped flowing, and strangest of all, there were no lights in any of the windows, even though night was beginning to fall. "Wind," Lysander called softly. "Why does everything look so sad down there?" "That, dear child, is the Nightmare King's influence spreading," the wind replied sadly. "The closer we get to Elysium, the stronger his power becomes. He feeds on worry and fear, and look how it's affecting everything around his domain." Just then, they heard something that made them all stop in their tracks. It was crying, but not just any crying. It was the sound of someone who had been crying for so long that they had almost forgotten how to stop. "Someone needs help, Lysander. See it immediately, because that's the kind of boy he was, always ready to help others even when he was on an important mission of his own." The crying was coming from a small cloud that had drifted away from the main path. Sitting on this lonely little cloud was the most unusual creature Lysander had ever seen. It looked like a cross between a butterfly and a small dragon, with wings that shimmered like soap bubbles and scales that changed color with its emotions. Right now, those scales were a deep, sad blue. "Hello there," Lysander called gently, the same way he would talk to a scared lamb. "Are you all right?" The creature looked up with big, teary eyes that sparkled like diamonds. "Oh," it squeaked in, a voice like tiny wind chimes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be in your way. I'm just, I'm just lost and scared, and I don't know how to get home. What's your name? Lysander asked, guiding Cloudy closer to the lonely little cloud. I'm Dreamwing, the creature sniffled. I'm a dream sprite, and I was carrying a very important dream to a little girl who has been having nightmares. But the Nightmare King's shadow birds chased me, and I dropped the dream, and now I'm lost, and the little girl will have another bad night, and it's all my fault. Dreamwing began crying even harder, and with each tear, her scales turned deeper and deeper blue. Lysander felt his heart fill with sympathy. He knew exactly how it felt to worry about not being able to help someone. Don't cry, Dreamwing, he said softly. Maybe we can help each other. He told Dreamwing about his mission to reach Elysium and free all the trapped good dreams. As he spoke, Dreamwing's scales began to shift from blue to a hopeful purple. You're really going to face the Nightmare King? Dreamwing asked with wonder. But you're just a little boy. That's what makes me perfect for the job, Lysander said with a small smile, remembering what the wind had told him. Sometimes the smallest people can do the biggest things. And I have the best helpers in the world. He introduced Dreamwing to all his sheep, and she giggled with delight when Snuggles nuzzled her tiny paw with her soft nose. I know these guys better than anyone, Dreamwing said, her scales now turning a bright, brave gold. If you help me find that lost dream, I'll guide you safely to Elysium. I know all the secret paths that the shadow birds don't watch. It's a deal, Lysander said, reaching out to gently shake Dreamwing's tiny paw. And so, as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, our brave little shepherd, his 4 woolly friends, and their new dream sprite companion set off together on the cloud path, heading toward whatever adventures and challenges awaited them. But Lysander felt something wonderful growing in his heart. It wasn't just hope, though there was plenty of that. It was the warm, strong feeling that comes from knowing you're not alone, that you have friends who believe in you, and that sometimes the most important journeys begin with helping someone else. The golden wind swirled around them all, carrying them forward toward the mysterious mountains ahead, where somewhere beyond waited Elysium and the greatest challenge of Lysander's young life. As they traveled deeper into the night sky, following Dreamwing's twinkling path through the stars, Lysander began to notice something magical happening. Every time they helped someone along the way, and oh, there were many who needed help, his heart compass glowed a little brighter, and the seeds of hope in his pouch seemed to hum with gentle warmth. They had helped a family of cloud rabbits find their way back to their fluffy warren, shared their simple bread with a hungry star mouse, and even convinced a grumpy thundercloud to stop rumbling so loudly that it was keeping baby birds awake. With each act of kindness, Lysander felt stronger and braver, even though they were getting closer to the Nightmare King's domain. Look, whispered Dreamwing, pointing ahead with her tiny, shimmering wing. There it is. Before them stretched a sight that took Lysander's breath away, but not in a good way. Where Elysium should have been a place of rolling meadows filled with sleeping flowers and gentle streams that sang lullabies, there now stood an enormous wall of twisted black thorns that reached so high they seemed to scrape the belly of the moon. The thorns writhed and moved like living things, and shadows danced between them in shapes that made even brave little Snuggles shiver. But the most heartbreaking thing of all was the sound coming from beyond the wall. It was the softest, saddest weeping, like thousands of beautiful dreams, crying because they couldn't reach the children who needed them. "Oh my," breathed Lysander, his voice barely a whisper. "How are we ever going to get through that?" Just then, a voice boomed across the sky, deep and hollow, like an echo in an empty cave. "Turn back, little shepherd. You cannot defeat me. I am the Nightmare King, and I feed on fear itself." But instead of running away, Lysander did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He sat down right there on the cloud path, pulled out the simple lunch his mama had packed, and began to share it with his friends. "What are you doing?" squeaked Dreamwing. "The Nightmare King is right there." "I'm having a snack," Lysander said calmly, offering her a piece of honey cake. "My mama always says that everything seems less scary when you're not hungry, and that the best plans are made on a full tummy." As they ate together under the starlight, Lysander listened carefully to the Nightmare King's booming voice, but instead of hearing threats and anger, he heard something else, something that made his heart feel sad and sorry all at once. "Do you hear that?" he asked Snuggles, who was the best at sensing feelings. She nodded her little woolly head and made a soft, sympathetic sound. "Hear what?" asked Dreamwing, tilting her head to listen. "He's lonely," Lysander said quietly. "Underneath all that shouting and scary talk, he sounds like someone who's been by himself for a very, very long time." This gave Lysander an idea. Not the kind of idea that involves fighting or magic spells, but the kind of gentle, simple idea that children are especially good at having. He pulled out his flute of peaceful dreams and began to play the softest, most comforting melody he could think of. The lullaby his mama used to sing when he was very small and couldn't sleep because of thunder. The music floated across the sky like silver ribbons, weaving through the thorns and shadows. Something wonderful began to happen. The thorns stopped writhing quite so violently. The shadows seemed to pause in their frightening dance. Even the weeping from beyond the wall grew quieter, as if the trapped dreams were listening too. "Who dares play music in my domain?" roared the Nightmare King. But his voice didn't sound quite as angry as before. It sounded confused, like someone who had heard a half-remembered song from long, long ago. "Just a little shepherd boy who thinks you might be tired," Lysander called back, continuing to play his gentle tune. "Would you like to talk instead of shouting? My throat gets sore when I shout too much." There was the longest pause Lysander had ever heard. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, a figure began to emerge from the shadows at the base of the thorn wall. The Nightmare King was not at all what Lysander had expected. He was tall, yes, and dressed in a cloak that seemed to be made of midnight itself. But his face was the saddest thing Lysander had ever seen. It was the face of someone who had forgotten how to smile, forgotten how to hope, forgotten how to dream anything but dark dreams. You're not afraid of me?" the Nightmare King asked, and his voice was different now, quieter, more puzzled than angry. "I'm a little scared," Lysander admitted honestly, because he had learned that telling the truth was always better than pretending. "But I'm more sad for you. You look like you haven't had a good night's sleep in years and years." The Nightmare King blinked in surprise. No one had ever said anything like that to him before. "Sleep," he repeated as if the word was in a foreign language. I don't remember the last time I slept peacefully. I only know how to make nightmares now. That must be very lonely, Lysander said gently, climbing down from Cloudy's back and walking closer, but not too close, because even sad people sometimes need their space. Making scary things all the time, never getting to make anything beautiful or happy. Little Snuggles, brave as always, trotted right up to the Nightmare King and looked up at him with her kind, trusting eyes. And do you know what happened? A single tear rolled down the Nightmare King's cheek. The first tear he had cried in 1,000 years. I used to be different, he whispered, kneeling down to gently pet Snuggles' soft wool. Long ago, I was the dreamkeeper's assistant. I helped children have the most wonderful dreams. But then something terrible happened, and I forgot how to make anything but nightmares. The more nightmares I made, the lonelier I became. And the lonelier I became, the more nightmares I made. What terrible thing happened? Lysander asked softly, sitting down on the ground so he wouldn't seem so tall and scary to the Nightmare King, who was looking smaller and sadder by the moment. I had a nightmare of my own, the Nightmare King admitted, his voice barely a whisper. A nightmare so scary that it trapped me inside it, and I couldn't find my way out. So I built these walls to keep all the good dreams away, thinking that if I couldn't have peaceful sleep, then no one should. Lysander felt his heart fill with understanding. He reached into his pouch and pulled out one of his seeds of hope. Would you like to try something? He asked gently. The Nightmare King looked at the tiny, glowing seed with wonder. What is it? It's a seed that grows into exactly what you need most, Lysander explained. But you have to plant it yourself, and you have to really, truly want things to be different. The Nightmare King stared at the seed for a long, long time. Then, with shaking hands, he took it from Lysander and pressed it into the dark ground at the base of his thorn wall. The moment the seed touched the earth, something miraculous began to happen. A tiny sprout of light pushed through the darkness, growing taller and brighter by the second. As it grew, the thorns began to wither and fall away, crumbling into stardust that sparkled harmlessly to the ground. But the most wonderful thing of all was what the seed grew into. It became a bridge made of moonbeams and starlight, stretching from where they stood all the way to the gates of Elysium, and walking across that bridge came the most beautiful figure Lysander had ever seen. It was Hypnos, the gentle god of sleep, and his robes seemed to be woven from the softest twilight and the most peaceful dreams. His smile was like the first moment of drifting off to sleep after a perfect day. My old friend, Hypnos said gently to the Nightmare King, I have been waiting so long for you to remember who you truly are. Hypnos, the Nightmare King whispered, and as he spoke the name, his dark cloak began to transform. The midnight fabric lightened to deep purple, then to soft blue, then to the gentle silver of peaceful sleep. I remember now. My name isn't Nightmare King at all. What is your name? Lysander asked, though somehow he thought he already knew. Oneros, came the reply, and the man who had been the Nightmare King smiled for the first time in 1,000 years. I am Oneros, the maker of dreams, and I had forgotten the most important thing of all. What's that? Asked Dreamwing, fluttering closer with her scales now shining like liquid gold. that even the darkest nightmare can become a beautiful dream if you have the courage to face it with love instead of fear. As he spoke, the last of the thorn wall crumbled away, and suddenly the sky was filled with the most wonderful sight imaginable. Thousands upon thousands of dreams came floating out of Elysium, dreams shaped like butterflies and soap bubbles, dreams that looked like shooting stars and rainbow bridges, dreams that sang lullabies and whispered gentle stories. But they didn't scatter randomly across the sky. Instead, they swirled around Lysander and his friends, around Oneros and Hypnos, dancing in grateful circles, before streaming off toward every corner of the world to find the children who had been waiting for them. "You did it, little shepherd," Hypnos said, placing a gentle hand on Lysander's shoulder. "You succeeded where armies of heroes could not, because you chose understanding over fighting, kindness over fear. We all did it together," Lysander said, looking around at his woolly friends, at Dreamwing, at Oneros, who was now glowing with gentle silver light. "That's how the best things always happen." Hypnos smiled and gestured toward Elysium, which now lay open and welcoming, its meadows swaying with flowers that chimed like soft bells in the evening breeze. "Would you like to see what you've helped to restore?" Oh, what a place Elysium was. There were streams that gurgled the most soothing sounds, trees whose leaves whispered the happiest bedtime stories, and soft grass that felt like the most comfortable bed in the world. In the center of it all was a beautiful pool that reflected not the sky above, but the dreams of every child in the world. "This is where all peaceful sleep comes from," Hypnos explained as they walked through the magical realm. "Every good dream, every restful night, every moment of perfect peace, it all begins here." Lysander watched in wonder as new dreams were born in the pool, like tiny stars being born in the night sky. Some were adventures, some were flying dreams, some were dreams of being hugged by people you loved. All of them were beautiful. "Now," said Hypnos, "it's time for you to choose your reward. You could stay here forever, living in perfect peace, and never having to worry about anything ever again, or, Lysander asked, though he was pretty sure he knew what he wanted to choose. "Or you can return home, taking with you the knowledge that whenever children everywhere lay their heads on their pillows, they'll have the sweet dreams they deserve, thanks to what you've done tonight." Lysander didn't even have to think about it. "I want to go home," he said firmly. "My mama and papa are probably worried about me, and besides, there are always more people who need help." Hypnos and Oneros smiled at each other, and Lysander could see they had expected this answer. "Very well," said Hypnos, "but first, let me give you a gift." He touched Lysander's forehead gently, and suddenly the little shepherd boy felt filled with the most wonderful warmth. "From now on, wherever you go, whomever you meet, you'll carry a little bit of Elysium with you. People will sleep more peacefully after meeting you, and children will have sweeter dreams." Oneros stepped forward too. "And I have a gift as well." He placed a small, glowing pendant around Lysander's neck. "This will help you remember that even the scariest situations can be transformed with understanding and kindness. When you're afraid, it will remind you to look for the lonely, sad person hiding behind the frightening mask." Dreamwing fluttered up to Lysander's shoulder. "Can I come with you sometimes?" she asked hopefully. "I'd like to help bring good dreams to children who need them." "Of course," Lysander laughed. "We'll always need help spreading good dreams." And so, as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky in soft pinks and golds, the golden wind carried Lysander and his sheep friends back down the cloud path toward home. As they traveled, Lysander could see that the world below was already changing. Lights were beginning to twinkle in windows again. Flowers were lifting their heads toward the morning sun, and even from high up in the sky, he could hear the sound of children laughing as they woke up from the most wonderful dreams. When they reached his familiar hillside, everything looked exactly the same as when they had left, but somehow more beautiful, more peaceful, more full of possibility. Lysander's mama and papa were just waking up, and when they saw him, they ran to give him the biggest, warmest hugs. "We had the most wonderful dreams," his mama said, tears of joy in her eyes. "We dreamed that you were on a great adventure, helping everyone in the world sleep peacefully." "That's funny," Lysander said with a smile, patting Snuggles and looking up at the sky where he could just barely see Dreamwing waving goodbye with her rainbow wings. "I had the exact same dream. But that night, and every night after, when Lysander lay down in his cozy bed with his sheep curled up nearby, he would touch the glowing pendant around his neck and smile, because he knew that somewhere high in the sky, Oneros and Hypnos were watching over all the children of the world, making sure their dreams were filled with wonder and peace. And in the morning, when the grown-ups in his village mentioned how, well, they had slept, how refreshed they felt, how their worries seemed smaller somehow, Lysander would just smile his gentle smile and offer to help with whatever they needed that day. Because he had learned the most important secret of all, that magic isn't about grand gestures or powerful spells. Real magic happens when you choose kindness over fear, when you look for the good in others even when they seem scary, and when you remember that the smallest person can make the biggest difference of all. And if you listen very carefully on quiet nights, when the stars are shining brightest and the world is settling into sleep, you might just hear the sound of sheep hooves on cloud paths, carrying a little shepherd boy and his friends to wherever dreams need defending and kindness needs spreading. For the magic of Elysium lives not just in that faraway realm, but in every act of compassion, every gentle word, every moment when someone chooses to understand rather than judge. And that magic, dear little dreamer, is something you carry with you too. Sweet dreams.